Welcome, everybody, to the Cone of Shame Veterinary Podcast. I am your host, Dr. Andy Roark. I'm here with my friend, Sheri Gilmartin. Sheri's a CVT. I think I forget to mention that when I introduce her later on. Anyway, she's a fascinating person. She has got her finger on the pulse of the vet profession in that she works with Vetsource and has access to data from over 8,000 veterinary hospitals across the United States, and she knows what's going on. And so I talked to her about what are the trends that she sees, what's happening with our profession, what's the state of the industry, and she lays it down. It's nice, it's concise. Guys, I think you'll get a lot out of this. This is a podcast you need to hear just to really understand what's happening in vet medicine. So anyway, without further ado, let's get into this.
This is your show. We're glad you're here. We want to help you in your veterinary career. Welcome to the Cone of Shame with Dr. Andy Roark.
Welcome to the podcast, Sheri Gilmartin. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing well. Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, it's always a pleasure. You are one of my favorite people to talk to. You are so insightful about our industry. For those who don't know you, I first had you on the podcast about 2 years ago, and it was because that's when I first started to see you. You have this sort of like annual cycle of people who are like, ooh, we're looking at a new year. Let's see what Sheri Gilmartin thinks. And you're at the conferences, you're usually speaking about the trends that you see and things like that. You've become a bit of a data-driven oracle, I would say, around the vet profession. You, for those who don't know, you said you are the VP of Sales at Vetsource. You guys you work with about 8,000 practices. The vast majority of them are general practices. Vetsource integrates with their PIM systems, whether you're doing home delivery or you're doing like data services or the Vet to Pet app, which is a loyalty app, which is great. So you have all these reasons to sort of interact with their data, and you have the ability to look at and sort of aggregate and sort of de-identify data, but look at what is actually happening at these 8,000 practices. And when you think about, there's probably about 30,000 vet practices in the United States. So 8,000 is a big chunk. And so anyway, I think that there's always a lot of interest around what do you kind of see? What are you looking at? I think you've always done a wonderful job of looking at the big picture and pulling out trends that are interesting and kind of pointing at where our industry is going. And, as we kind of make our way into 2025 here, I just want to circle back around with you because it's been a little while since we talked and everything. Sheri, I feel like there's a lot of uncertainty in the world and it permeates into our profession. I think a lot of people are trying to figure out where is America going? Where is the profession going? Where is business going in general? Where's the economy going? All of those kinds of things. And I don't ask you to have answers to those things, but I really would like to hear your insights as a lot of us kind of look around and say, what is the next year going to be like? What's the next 5 years going to be like? Can you start to talk at kind of a high level about where you see the profession going?
Yeah, thank you for that. And thank you for the warm welcome. I appreciate that. I appreciate the kind words. I'm very passionate about this industry. So to bring insights to others like yourself, where we can look at trends and then have a conversation about them and what we think is happening is something that is very important to me. We do have access to a lot of insights, and so aggregating and de-identifying the data from the practices that we serve to bring these insights to everybody in the industry, our customers and our partners, so that we can stay ahead of them, right? That is the goal. It's to provide the insights so that we have a clear understanding of, how things are looking and then where do we need to take action. And so helping practices to be proactive, to be successful. So appreciate the conversation with the data that we have. We look at things at the average per practice. So what the average practice is experiencing, it being the average, there are some that are overperforming and some that are underperforming. So just note that, we're looking at the average per practice. We're not looking at projections where we're trying to gauge the industry as a whole, but it's just, the average small business. The other thing I will say is, the data gives us a view into what is happening. Why it is happening is another story, and that's harder to get at. And so when we share some of the numbers, just want to make sure that, we think about, okay, this is what is happening. There's probably 3 or 4 different reasons why. And that's where we have to, have conversations with others like yourself in the industry that we can, put together a hypothesis, and then we can dig in further with the data to really understand why. So I say all that, the trends have been pretty consistent for the past, I would say, year, 12 to 18 months. We're continuing to see a decline in visits, and a visit is any invoice in a practice, so really just overall volumes. With that said, it does seem to be plateauing a bit, so we've been hovering around that 2 to 2.5% year-over-year decline in visits and in volumes. What we are seeing is that the revenue per practice, that growth is starting to slow down as well.
Right.
So we ended 2024 with a 3.3% increase in revenue year over year. If we look back to the end of 2023, it was at about 5%. So that decline in revenue is continuing. And so, practices have pulled back a bit on price increases in 2024, trying to reduce price increases. That is certainly a factor to the revenue slowdown. More of a decline in volumes, certainly contributing to that. And then it also could be, while the volumes in terms of visits are starting to plateau, it could be that when people are coming in, they're having fewer services. And so, a reduction in just revenue per visit as well.
Yeah. So when you say we're seeing sort of a plateau in the decline, are you saying that we're moving towards a 0% decrease, or are you saying we are moving towards stabilizing at a 2% loss year over year, where the gambling man might continue to bet on a 2% reduction year over year? So which of those are you sort of saying?
The latter, for sure.
The latter.
So,
okay, that's not what I was hoping. I was hoping you were saying it's plateauing. I'm like, great, plateaus are good. Not when they plateau onto a downward slope.
Yes, I mean, there was a time where when we were seeing a steady, a steeper decline. And so, seeing it remain, consistent in that -2 year over year is an improvement from where we were a year ago.
Yeah. When you sort of look at this, I mean, are there any pieces of the puzzle that look a little different than they have in previous years? So I guess I'm kind of looking for, we continue to see the story of visits going down, practices staying profitable because they've been raising prices. Sounds like elasticity on price increase. We knew that was going to run out at some point. You can't keep raising prices on people over and over again and not have them notice, especially when prices of everything else is going up. Things are getting sort of tight, I think, for your average, grocery shopper. Are there changes that you're seeing? Are there bright spots? Are there types of practices that are maybe outperforming other types of practices in general categories?
Yeah, good question. So there's two things that stick out to me in the data. And the first is we did a comparison of independently owned practice versus corporately owned practices. And so comparing independents versus groups. And we are seeing that independent practices have less of a decline in visits and more of an increase in revenue. So their revenue's at about a 5% increase year over year, and their visits are down about 1.2%. So we are seeing the independents outperform in terms of visits and revenue. And the other area that is sticking out is cats. Actually, feline patients are up 1.2% year over year compared to canine patients that are down 3.4%, which, comparing these numbers with some of the surveys around pet adoption and new pets, reading that people are opting for cats or small dogs, and adoptions are down overall year over year. But that aligns with, of those people that are getting patients, we're seeing an increase in feline patients.
Okay. Well, I mean, we've said forever that we want to do a better job of getting cats in. So that's small victories. I'm a perpetual optimist. I like to find silver linings. That's good. You said, at the beginning, there's the what's happening and there's the why it's happening. Do you have any insight as to what might be driving independent practices' slower decline versus the corporate groups?
Yep. So these are theories. And again, harder to get into the why. It could be related to price increases. It could be that corporately owned practices were more proactive with price increases and took price increases earlier, potentially impacting visits. It may be that in 2025, independents were just later with the price increases. They catch up. Maybe they start to see more of a decline in volume in 2025. It's hard to tell, but that is one hypothesis. The second is, it could be staffing and capacity challenges. If we think back to 3 years ago, COVID practices were super busy. There was competition for labor, and corporate groups were offering signing bonuses, things like that. It could be that those incentives now have reached their, 2 to 3 year mark, and we're seeing more turnover. Again, a hypothesis. And it could be a customer service, client bonding situation. There's a lot of people that theorize that the culture in an independent practice and that relationship with the client is more personal.
Yeah.
And so that could be a contributing factor.
Sheri, if I came to you and I was like, I'm going to start a vet practice, Sheri, what advice do you have for me? What best practices would you give to me starting a vet practice today? What would you say? Sort of looking at the information that you have, or the things you would say, Andy, well, make sure you do this or make sure you do that or consider this approach. Yeah, just say I'm starting from scratch right now. What advice would you give to me?
Well, that's fun to think about, because isn't it fun to think about starting something from scratch?
Oh, absolutely.
No tech debt, no, staffing, like you're just starting from scratch. That would be a lot of fun. First and foremost, leveraging all of the technology and the tools that are available to practices today. Automate as much as you can, really drive efficiency in the practice. When you're starting from scratch, there's an advantage there because you just start off using those things and you don't have to worry about implementation and making changes in the practice. But efficiency is key for practices. The other thing that's critical there is a focus on customer service. I really believe that practices that focus on customer service make it easy for clients to do business with you, make it easy for them to care of their patients. They're going to be more successful. And so if you're starting a practice and you're implementing online booking platforms, you're implementing texting as a primary means of communication, all of these things that make it easy for your staff and easy for your pet owners, I think that will be really important as you think through, what is this customer experience going to be?
Is there a type of practice or a size of practice that you would bet on? If I could magic wand have a practice, would you say, ooh, Andy, you want one that a mobile practice is going to be a great bang for your buck? Or you say, oh, companion exclusive, stay away from mixed animal? Or would you say, a 3-vet practice is a nice, profitable practice? Things like that. Are there categories like that you look at that you would say, well, these specific categories tend to punch above their weight class?
So looking at the data, we for sure see smaller practices outperforming. And again, I think it comes back to culture and the opportunity to build a stronger bond with the pet owners, make the experience more personalized. Could also be that they are younger, newer practices that have implemented a lot of the tools that we have to create, a more automated, convenient experience for pet owners. So we do see them outperforming, but we see all types of practices be successful, right? There's all these different niches. And I think really just focusing on the customer and making it easy for them is the most important.
When you look at overall economic trends in America, are there trends that you think, or I don't know, are there areas of concern out there that you think are going to have a significant impact? There's a lot of talk about tariffs, for example. And, at first I thought, I don't know how much this is going to impact vet practices. And then I sort of looked into it a little bit. And a lot of our pharmaceuticals come from outside of the U.S., or a lot of ingredients for our pharmaceuticals come from outside the U.S., and there's a lot of red tape around changing your suppliers and things like that. And so I'm just sort of looking at those things. Do you have storm clouds up ahead that you're paying particular attention to?
Yeah. So there is definitely a lot of unknowns in terms of how this year is going to go with the tariffs and the economy. And I do think that without a doubt, it's going to impact veterinary practices. Also looking at, layoffs, government layoffs. If you're in an area where there are a lot of government employees, how is that going to impact the veterinary practices in that area? Interesting. What I'm looking at, we look at, as I said, the decline in visits is an average per practice.
Yeah.
We broke the practices into quartiles to look at the top 25% of practices in terms of those that have been able to maintain visits. And the top 25% of practices, they actually had a 10% growth in visits year over year. And when you look at the average client transaction for those practices, it was a 0.14% increase year over year. Okay. Compared to the bottom 75% that was at a 3.5% increase in average client transaction. So again, we can't pinpoint the why, but we can question to say, Are these practices segmenting the invoice? Are they working with the pet owners better to understand how much they can afford to pay in that visit? And is that if we're keeping the average client transaction more stable, is that going to drive more volumes? Our business, the veterinary business, is dependent on pet owner disposable income.
Yes. Yeah, it
And
is.
so we have to be able to work with that, where we are with the economy, and be able to meet pet owners where they are and work with them if they need to break things out, understand what they can and cannot do, focus on a spectrum of care, and be able to do the best we can with what the pet owner can do.
Yeah. It sounds like you really integrate the spectrum of care with the customer service and sort of paying attention to what the clients want and what they're able to do, sort of as a holistic sort of, I don't know, customer service, medical delivery approach. Is that an accurate assessment?
It is. And I say that, looking at the industry and looking at the data, and also me as a pet owner and how I am when I go. And, I'm lucky and I can afford care for my pet, but I still make my own decisions based on my own philosophies.
Sure.
And, I think brought my cat in with a cough, and we did an x-ray and my cat had a mass. And, veterinarian appropriately was talking to me about, doing diagnostics to understand what it was. But for me as a pet owner, it wasn't going to change what I was going to do.
Mm.
And so I didn't need a diagnosis.
Right.
And so that's where I think about the spectrum of care, not just from a financial perspective, but understanding my expectations and my needs.
No, I think you're right. I think these are good, healthy conversations. I think we're all sort of adapting to the way that the world is going. People don't have endless resources, and the cost of care continues to go up. And especially I look at specialty care and I go, wow, these are not the prices I was quoting, 5 years ago. And I get it. I'm not trying to be critical, but it just is what it is. I think people are going to kind of run into those realities. And I think the better we are at sort of addressing them and maintaining trust with pet owners while we navigate the fact that things are more expensive, I think that's going to be an increasingly important skill for veterinarians and vet techs to have. Sheri, thank you so much for being here. Thanks for sharing with me. I always appreciate your insight. Next year, I want you to bring better news if you can. I'd really like to hear more about growth and pets coming back in. If you could work on that, that would be ideal. So just my request for next year. Make the
No
day
problem.
to say that for me, please. Okay?
I will take care of it.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Sheri, where can people find you online?
We do have our free industry tracker on vetsource.com, so you can go and you can track revenue and visits across practices. You can reach me personally on LinkedIn at Sheri Gilmartin. I'm happy to talk more about trends with anyone in the industry.
Outstanding. Thanks so much for that. I'll link up everything in the show notes, so guys, you can go check it out there. Sheri, thanks for being here. Guys, thanks for tuning in, everybody. Take care of yourselves, gang. And that's what I got. Guys, thanks for being here. Thanks to Sheri for making time. I really appreciate it, guys. Thanks to Vetsource for sharing the data and the information that they are bringing together. It's super helpful just to understand what's going on. Gang, if you enjoyed the episode, if you enjoy any of the episodes, you can always do me a favor by leaving me an honest review wherever you get your podcasts. It means the world to me. It's how people find the show. It's just a nice thing. We should all look for nice things to do that don't take a lot of time and effort. I can think of one. You could write an honest review of the podcast, unless you hate it. And then the nice thing is not writing an honest review of the podcast, and I would accept that as well. Anyway, I think I'm going to be done here. Gang, take care, everybody. I'll talk to you later. Bye.